right. Anything of note on the defensive side?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think to a certain extent, Venables is going to let let the offensive staff kind of do what they do. Not that he's not having input, obviously, but I think he's certainly more in tune with the defense, as you would expect, right? I mean, that's his calling card. And I think the thing that's just it's very interesting, and I don't know. I mean, certainly the other coaches are like this, but you see the the infectious attitude, the energy that Venables has brought to this program, and it's just like it's permeating through the players, it's going through the coaching staff, and it's going through like he gets in the middle with these kids when they're with their stretching and warming up, and stretches right along with them. And so I mean it's very I think of this from a coaching perspective, and I think of it from what I've done, and I think it's very insignificant to some, but people that are in the day to day and they don't look at the head coach as more of kind of a CEO and more of a okay, this is a guy that's he's willing to do these things with us, right? So he's willing to get his hands dirty. So I think that's doing such a great job at getting these kids to buy in, getting these kids to play at a higher level. So I think while I don't have a whole lot of details, individually on how Oklahoma is, who some guys that are stepping up. Jeffrey Johnson is a guy that I've continued to hear good things about. Clayton Smith is a guy that I'm hearing some good things about from an edge perspective. And I think the one thing that's interesting is Venables does not like to play freshmen. So that's just his. It's just his mo. It's what he's had from years and years, and his mo is get those young kids in here, develop them, let them learn. And he wants juniors and seniors playing, and freshmen and sophomores, learning. Unless you got one of those freak guys that you just can't. He's just too good to keep off the field. So, I know there's specifically at the linebacker position, there's a lot of freshmen that have opportunities to play. Kip Lewis is a guy, Kobe McKenzie is a guy, Jaron Kanik is a guy. So from everything I've heard, those guys they're freshmen in spring, right? They're going from specifically Kanik is a guy, going from a very small town in Kansas, and now going to a freshman at one of the biggest universities in the country. And so you would expect those guys to be swimming just a little bit. And so I think when you look at the linebacker position, Mark, you hear a lot about TD Roof. I've heard his name mentioned a couple of times as a kid. That I think it's interesting to see how much in the two deep he'll get, because everything that I've heard is this kid is very obviously a coach's son, a linebacker coach's son at that. So he's very fundamentally sound. He's a little small. He's a little bit on the smallish side. So I mean, and obviously you think of that from the aspect of that he came from Appalachian State. So will be interesting to see if he's big and if he feels big enough, athletic enough to make that too deep. But I think Deshaun White, David Agwebu, those are two guys that are going to be very critical to this defense. They've got to play, and they've got to play at a high level for this linebacker core to be successful. So and Danny Stutzman's another guy who's going to be who's going to be counted on to be a big playmaker. And so I think the line, I mean, obviously that's you would kind of expect the linebacker group to be a good group based on Venables. That's his calling card, linebacker. And so I think he'll make sure that group ends up being kind of where they need to be. From a media availability, it was very interesting to listen to Jay Valai this week. He was there for probably about 20 answered questions about 15, 20 minutes. And I think, and this is not necessarily a ton of shade at the previous coaching staff. However, one of the things that was very, very interesting early on was DJ Graham thought it was such a value add to have Valai as a guy that has played the position. He played the position in college, has coached that position both at the next level at the NFL within the Kansas City Chiefs, coached that with Texas and Alabama as well. So I think the fact that that's kind of and when you hear him talk, it's really I think it's something that's very evident in the fact that he was a lot more technical in the way he spoke about. So I think that the coaching aspect of it between going from Roy Manning to Jay Valai, I think it's going to be a lot more valuable for this team overall. He's another guy that is very, and not that any coaches aren't, but he's another guy that's very, very willing to get in there and as a coach kind of lead by example, show the kids exactly what to do. Don't be a teller, be a shower in terms of that. So I think that's something that's been valuable. I've heard Key Lawrence has had an outstanding spring thus far. I think Woody Washington's had a really good spring so far. Those are two guys that we've talked about, Mark. I will be surprised if those two guys don't start in the defensive backfield. Now, some of the others are certainly up for grabs. I think there's a lot of competition at the free safety spot. I think there's some competition at the other cornerback spot. Trey Morrison is a guy that also not as probably as firm as Key Lawrence and Woody Washington, but I think I would be surprised if whether it's at nickel or whether it's at free safety or whether it's at the cornerback position that he's not in that starting lineup. So yeah, I mean everything's been very positive. Nothing, kind of any negative that I've heard really from camp outside of I think they would like to have maybe a little bit more depth at the edge position. So I think it'll be interesting to see as spring ends and this kind of the we roll into summer what Oklahoma does from a portal perspective, because there's a few position groups where you could see Oklahoma maybe looking at seeing what's out there and looking to improve that roster a little bit on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively.